The camera panned across the elegant restaurant, capturing the soft glow of chandeliers reflecting off crystal glasses before settling on a man in an impeccably tailored suit. James Harrington, tech mogul and CEO of Harrington Innovations, sat alone at a corner table, checking his watch with growing impatience. Have you ever misjudged someone so completely that when you finally saw them, truly saw them, it left you breathless? This is that story. The narrator's voice was warm, inviting. If this journey of unexpected connection resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us what truly matters in life. James drummed his fingers on the white tablecloth. This dinner was a formality, nothing more, a thank you to his executive assistant Eleanor for saving a crucial business deal last week. In the 3 years she'd worked for him, he'd barely noticed her beyond her exceptional efficiency. Eleanor Parker was brilliant but forgettable, always in muted colors, hair pulled back severely, glasses perpetually sliding down her nose as she focused intently on her work. The maitre d' approached, guiding someone to his table. James looked up, prepared to greet Eleanor with polite detachment, but the words died in his throat. The woman before him was Eleanor, yet somehow not. Her usual severe bun was replaced by soft waves framing her face. Without her glasses, her eyes, had they always been that striking shade of green, met his with quiet confidence. She wore a simple midnight blue dress that complemented her figure perfectly. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, her voice the same practical tone he'd heard 1,000 times in meetings. Traffic was terrible. James stood, suddenly aware he was staring. "No, you're right on time." As Eleanor sat down, James realized with uncomfortable clarity that he'd never really looked at her before. Not once in 3 years. Eleanor hadn't planned to dress differently for dinner. The invitation had surprised her. James Harrington didn't socialize with employees, especially not someone as invisible as his executive assistant. But her roommate Zoe had insisted. "It's dinner at Lumiere," Zoe had said, eyes wide. "You can't wear your work clothes." "It's not a date," Eleanor had protested. "It's a business dinner." "After hours? At the most romantic restaurant in the city?" Zoe raised an eyebrow. "Besides, when's the last time you dressed up for yourself?" That question had struck a chord. When had she last done anything for herself? Since her father's illness began 2 years ago, her life had narrowed to work and hospital visits. Even before that, she'd learned early to make herself invisible, competent but forgettable, after watching her mother face workplace harassment for years. So she'd let Zoe help her get ready, feeling oddly vulnerable without her usual armor of practical clothes and severe hairstyle. Now, sitting across from her visibly stunned boss, she regretted the decision. "Is something wrong?" she asked, reaching for her water glass. James seemed to recover himself. "No, not at all. You look different." "Good different or bad different?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Good," he said quickly. "Very good. I just didn't recognize you at first." Eleanor felt a flicker of irritation. "I've been your executive assistant for 3 years, Mr. Harrington." "James," he corrected automatically. "And yes, I know. I didn't mean," he stopped, seeming genuinely flustered for the first time since she'd known him. "Let's start over. Thank you for joining me tonight, Eleanor." The waiter arrived with menus, breaking the awkward moment. As they ordered, James found himself watching Eleanor with new eyes. How had he never noticed the quiet intelligence in her expression? The subtle humor in the curve of her lips when she thanked the waiter? "So," he said when they were alone again. "Tell me something about yourself that isn't in your employee file." Eleanor looked surprised. "Like what?" "Anything. Hobbies? Family? Secret talents?" She hesitated, as if weighing how personal to get. "I play the cello. Or I used to, before my father got sick." "I didn't know your father was ill." I'm sorry. Early onset Alzheimer's, she said, her fingers tracing the stem of her water glass. He was diagnosed 2 years ago. James did the math. That would have been right after you started working for me. She nodded. The benefits package was a major reason I took the job. The health insurance has been essential. James felt a twinge of shame. He prided himself on knowing everything about his company, yet he'd had no idea one of his closest employees was dealing with such a personal crisis. Is that why you work such long hours? He asked. I've always assumed you were just ambitious. A small smile touched her lips. I am ambitious, actually. But yes, the overtime helps with the medical bills. The appetizers arrived, and as they ate, James found himself genuinely interested in learning more about the woman he'd overlooked for so long. Eleanor, initially reserved, gradually opened up about her love of classical music, her degree in international business that she'd earned while working full-time, and her father, a former literature professor who had instilled in her a love of poetry. He used to recite Wordsworth from memory, she said, her eyes distant with the memory. Now he sometimes doesn't remember my name. That must be incredibly difficult. It is. But we still have good days. She straightened, clearly uncomfortable with having shared so much. What about you? Something not in your Forbes profile? James laughed. Fair enough. Let's see. I can't swim. The man with the beachfront mansion in Malibu can't swim? Ironic, isn't it? I nearly drowned as a child. Never got over the fear. Yet you bought a house on the ocean. I like looking at it, he said simply. Beautiful things that frighten me have always fascinated me. Their eyes met across the table, and something shifted in the air between them, a moment of genuine connection that surprised them both. As the evening progressed, Eleanor found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did. James Harrington, the demanding perfectionist who terrified half the office, was showing a side of himself she'd never seen, thoughtful, occasionally self-deprecating, and surprisingly good at listening. Why did you invite me to dinner? She asked as they waited for dessert. Really? James considered the question. The Nakamura deal. You saved it when I was ready to walk away. That's my job. No, your job is to manage my schedule and field my calls. Stepping in when I was about to torpedo a multi-million-dollar deal because of my ego, that was above and beyond. Eleanor shrugged. You were right about the technical specifications, but wrong about how to handle Nakamura. He values respect over being right. Something I struggle with, James admitted. I've noticed, she said dryly. He laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his usually serious face. I'm beginning to think I don't pay you enough. You definitely don't, she replied with unexpected boldness. Their desserts arrived, chocolate soufflé for him, crème brûlée for her. As they ate, James found himself wondering how many other things he'd missed by not paying attention to the people around him. Tell me about your dreams, he said suddenly. Eleanor looked up, surprised. My dreams? What would you do if money wasn't an issue? If your father was healthy? She was quiet for a long moment. I'd start my own international consulting firm, she finally said. Helping companies navigate cultural differences in business. It's what my degree is in, actually. Why haven't you? Besides the obvious financial constraints? She tapped her spoon gently against her dessert. Fear, probably. Leaving a secure job is terrifying when someone depends on you. James nodded, understanding all too well. His own path had been cushioned by family wealth, a safety net Eleanor didn't have. What about you? She asked. If you weren't running Harrington Innovations, what would you do? The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him that in years. I'd teach, he said, surprising himself with the answer. Engineering, probably. I miss the pure creativity of it, before everything became about quarterly profits and shareholder value. "You'd be a terrible teacher," Eleanor said with unexpected frankness. "You have no patience." Instead of being offended, James laughed again. "You're probably right. Though I might surprise you." "You already have," she said quietly. Their eyes met again, and this time the connection lingered, neither looking away until the waiter appeared with the check. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool and clear. James had dismissed his driver earlier, planning to call him when dinner was over. "Can I drop you somewhere?" Eleanor asked, gesturing to her modest sedan parked across the street. James hesitated, not ready for the evening to end. "Actually, would you mind taking a walk? There's a park just down the block. Unless you need to get home." "My father's caregiver stays until 11 on Fridays," she said. "A walk sounds nice." They strolled side by side, the city lights creating a gentle glow around them. In the small park, fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and a few other couples wandered the paths. "I owe you an apology," James said as they walked. "For what?" "For not seeing you." He stopped, turning to face her. 3 years, Eleanor. You've been right there, making my life and my company run smoothly, and I never really looked at you." "Most people don't," she said simply. "I've perfected the art of being invisible when I need to be." "Why would you want to be invisible?" Eleanor sighed, looking out at the park rather than at him. "My mother was beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made men stare. She worked in corporate finance in the 80s and 90s, and her looks were always used against her. Too pretty to be taken seriously, too attractive to be promoted without rumors. I watched what she went through and decided early on that I'd rather be overlooked than objectified." James felt a pang of guilt, knowing he'd been startled by her appearance tonight precisely because he'd never noticed her beauty before. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Not just for how I've overlooked you, but for a world that made you feel you had to choose." She turned back to him, her expression softening. Tonight wasn't about being seen differently. It was about being seen completely. "There's a difference." "I'm beginning to understand that," he said. They continued walking, their conversation flowing easily now as they discussed books they'd loved, places they wanted to travel, and the challenges of their work. When they circled back to where they'd started, both seemed reluctant to end the evening. "I should get home," Eleanor finally said, glancing at her watch. "Of course." James hesitated. "Thank you for tonight. Not just for joining me, but for seeing me too." She smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. "Good night, James." As he watched her drive away, James realized he was indeed breathless, not because Eleanor had transformed into some goddess for the evening, but because for the first time in years, he'd connected with someone who saw him as more than his wealth or position. Someone who challenged him and understood him in equal measure. And he'd nearly missed it entirely. The following Monday, Eleanor arrived at work to find a handwritten note on her desk along with a small package. "For the music you've set aside. Perhaps it's time to play again. J." Inside was an elegant fountain pen and a leather-bound journal. Opening it, she found sheet music, Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, her favorite piece and one she'd mentioned during dinner. She looked toward James's office, but his door was closed. With a small smile, she tucked the journal into her drawer and began her day as usual. When James emerged for their morning meeting, he greeted her with the same professional courtesy he always had, but his eyes held a new awareness, a recognition that hadn't been there before. "Good morning, Eleanor. Shall we begin?" "Of course, Mr. Harrington." But as they reviewed his schedule, something had undeniably changed between them. A foundation had been laid for something neither had expected, a connection based not on appearance or position, but on truly seeing each other for the first time. The weeks that followed brought subtle shifts in their professional relationship. James began asking for Eleanor's input on business decisions, valuing her perspective in ways he never had before. Eleanor, in turn, found herself sharing ideas more freely, no longer hiding behind her carefully constructed professional facade. Their dinner had opened a door, but both were cautious about what might lie beyond it. One evening, as Eleanor was preparing to leave the office, James appeared at her desk. "I have tickets to the symphony this weekend," he said without preamble. "Bach is on the program. Would you like to join me?" Eleanor hesitated. "Is this a business function?" "No," he said simply. "Just music I thought you might enjoy." She studied him for a moment. "I'd like that." The symphony was magnificent, the music washing over them in waves of emotion. Eleanor closed her eyes during her favorite passages, her fingers moving slightly as if playing along. James found himself watching her more than the orchestra, captivated by the genuine joy on her face. Afterward, over late-night coffee at a small cafe, Eleanor spoke of her father's deteriorating condition and her growing fears for his future. James listened, offering not solutions but understanding, something she needed far more. "He's having more bad days than good now," she said, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "The doctors say he'll need full-time care soon." "What can I do?" James asked. Eleanor shook her head. "You don't need to do anything. This isn't why I know," he interrupted gently. "I'm not asking as your boss. I'm asking as a friend." The word seemed inadequate for what was growing between them, but it was safe, and they both needed that safety for now. "Just listen," she said. "That's enough." But it wasn't enough for James. The next day, he contacted the best memory care facility in the city, a place with an 18-month waiting list, and arranged for Eleanor's father to be admitted immediately. When he told her, she initially refused. "I can't accept that," she said firmly. "It's too much." "Consider it a bonus for exceptional service," he said. When she still hesitated, he added, "Eleanor, please. Let me do this one thing." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James struggled to articulate the feelings he was only beginning to understand himself. "Because you've spent 3 years making my life better in 1,000 small ways I never acknowledged. Because you deserve support. Because he stopped, not ready to name the emotion taking root in his heart. In the end, she accepted, and the relief of knowing her father would receive the best possible care lifted a weight she'd carried for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand straight. Summer turned to fall, and their relationship continued to evolve. They attended concerts together, discovered a shared love of obscure foreign films, and spent long evenings in conversation that ranged from business strategy to philosophy. At work, they maintained professional boundaries, but everyone noticed the change in their dynamic, the mutual respect that had deepened into something more complex. Eleanor began playing the cello again, practicing in the evenings after visiting her father. James found himself working less on weekends, instead spending time on long-neglected hobbies and friends, and increasingly, with Eleanor. They were careful, both aware of the complications their growing feelings created. Eleanor refused any special treatment at work, sometimes being even more demanding of herself to avoid any perception of favoritism. James respected her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But the connection between them continued to strengthen, built on a foundation of genuine understanding and respect. One crisp October evening, they walked through the same park where they'd strolled after their first dinner. The trees were ablaze with autumn colors, leaves crunching beneath their feet. "I've been offered a position at Meridian Global," Eleanor said suddenly. "Head of International Relations." James stopped walking, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. "When?" "Yesterday. It's a significant promotion. More money, more responsibility. Are you going to take it?" He tried to keep his voice neutral, though the thought of not seeing her every day left him feeling hollow. Eleanor turned to face him. "I don't know. It's the kind of opportunity I've worked for my entire career." "Then you should take it," James said, though the words cost him. You deserve it. Even though it means I wouldn't be working for you anymore. I don't want you working for me, he said quietly. I never did. Hurt flashed across her face, and he realized how his words had sounded. That came out wrong, he said quickly. What I mean is, I don't want to be your boss, Eleanor. I want. He took a deep breath. I want to be with you. As equals. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. That's why. That's why I've been so careful, James continued. I didn't want you to feel pressured or think that my feelings had anything to do with your position at the company. Eleanor studied his face, searching for the truth in his words. And if I take the job at Meridian? Then I'll miss seeing you every day, he said honestly. But I'll be proud of you, and I'll hope that whatever is growing between us might have a chance to flourish without the complications of being boss and employee. A small smile touched her lips. You've changed, James Harrington. You changed me, he replied simply. Or rather, you helped me remember who I wanted to be before success and money became my only measures of worth. They stood in silence for a moment, autumn leaves drifting down around them. I haven't given them my answer yet, Eleanor finally said. I told them I needed a week to decide. Take the time you need. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. She nodded, and they continued their walk, their hands occasionally brushing against each other but neither quite ready to take that final step. 3 days later, Eleanor was working late, finishing a presentation for James's meeting the next morning. The office was quiet, most employees having left hours ago. When she looked up, James was standing in the doorway of his office, watching her. You don't have to stay this late anymore, he said. I can finish the presentation. I know, she replied. But I wanted to. He crossed to her desk, perching on the edge of it. Have you made your decision about Meridian? I have. She saved her work and closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. I'm not taking it. James blinked in surprise. Why not? It's everything you've worked for. Not everything, she said quietly. I called them this morning and declined. Then I spoke with the board. The board? About what? About creating a new position at Harrington Innovations. Director of International Strategy and Cultural Relations. She met his eyes steadily. Reporting directly to the board, not to you. Understanding dawned on James's face. You're staying, but not as my assistant. Exactly. No conflict of interest, no power imbalance. She took a deep breath. No reason we can't explore whatever this is between us, if that's still what you want. In answer, James reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. It is. Very much. The board approved it, by the way, she added with a small smile. Apparently they've been looking for someone to manage our international expansion for months. Your HR department has been struggling to find qualified candidates. Because the most qualified person was already working here, James said, shaking his head with a rueful smile. I should have seen it sooner. We both had our blind spots, Eleanor acknowledged. But we're seeing clearly now. James stood, still holding her hand. Have dinner with me tomorrow? Not as my assistant, not as a colleague. Just as Eleanor. I'd like that, she said, rising to stand before him. Just as I'd like you to kiss me now, if you're inclined. His answer was to draw her gently into his arms, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like both a beginning and a homecoming. 6 months later, Eleanor stood at the podium in the Harrington Innovations conference room, presenting the company's new international initiative to the board and senior leadership team. Her confidence and expertise were evident as she outlined the strategy she developed for expanding into emerging markets while respecting local cultures and business practices. James watched from his seat at the head of the table, pride evident in his expression. The woman commanding the room with such quiet authority was the same Eleanor who had worked in his shadow for years, her intelligence and vision had always been there, waiting to be recognized and valued. When she finished her presentation to enthusiastic approval from the board, their eyes met across the room in a moment of shared triumph. Later that evening, they walked hand in hand along the beach near James's Malibu home, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "The board loved your proposal," James said. "Especially the partnership with local educational institutions." "That was inspired by my father, actually," Eleanor replied. "Something he said on one of his good days last month about knowledge being the only true currency." "How is he doing?" "Better, since moving to the new facility. He has more clarity some days." She squeezed James's hand. "He asked about you yesterday." "What did you tell him?" "That you're learning to swim," she said with a smile, nodding toward the ocean. James laughed. "One lesson at a time. Some fears take longer to overcome than others." They stopped walking, turning to face the water. The waves lapped gently at the shore, no longer seeming as threatening as they once had. "I have something for you," James said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. Eleanor's breath caught. "James. It's not what you think," he said quickly, opening the box to reveal a key. "At least, not yet. That's coming, but I know we both agreed to take this slowly." "What is it, then?" she asked, taking the key from the box. "A key to a studio I bought. For your music." He gestured up the beach to a small building nestled among the trees. "It's soundproofed, with perfect acoustics. There's a grand piano, and space for a small ensemble if you ever want to play with others again." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. "You remembered. That playing for others was your dream before your father got sick?" "Of course I remembered." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Every dream you've shared with me is important." Eleanor closed her hand around the key, emotion making it difficult to speak. "Thank you for seeing me," she finally managed. "The real me." "Thank you for showing me how to truly see," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "Not just you, but everyone around me. The world is so much richer when you stop judging by appearances." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood together on the shore, two people who had found in each other not just attraction or companionship, but a profound understanding that had transformed them both. 1 year to the day after their first dinner together, James and Eleanor returned to Lumiere. The same corner table awaited them, set with fine china and crystal, candlelight creating a warm glow. Eleanor wore the same blue dress she'd worn that night, her hair now styled in loose waves that had become her preferred look. James, watching her across the table, marveled at how the woman before him could be simultaneously so familiar and yet continue to surprise him daily. "Happy anniversary," he said, raising his glass. "Is that what this is?" she asked with a teasing smile. "An anniversary?" "1 year since I finally opened my eyes," he replied. "Seems worth celebrating." They had come so far in that year. Eleanor's department was thriving, expanding Harrington Innovations' reach across 3 continents. James had stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on product development, rediscovering his passion for engineering. Together, they had created a foundation supporting arts education and Alzheimer's research. And personally, they had built a relationship based on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that had grown steadily stronger with each passing day. "I have something for you," Eleanor said, reaching into her purse. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a certificate for swimming lessons, not with a regular instructor, but with a therapist who specialized in helping adults overcome aquatic phobias. "I thought it was time," she said gently. "Not because you need to change, but because I know how much you love the ocean. I want you to be able to enjoy it fully." James reached across the table for her hand. "Thank you. For this, and for everything else you've brought into my life." "Even the arguments?" she asked with a raised eyebrow, referring to their occasionally heated debates about business strategy. Especially those, he said with a laugh. No one challenges me like you do. After dinner, instead of the park, James led Eleanor to the rooftop garden of the restaurant, which had been closed to other patrons. String lights twinkled overhead, and a small ensemble played softly in the corner, including a cellist who nodded respectfully to Eleanor. "What is all this?" she asked, looking around in wonder. "I wanted to create a perfect moment," James said, suddenly nervous. "Though I'm realizing now that the perfect moments with you have never been about grand gestures or elaborate settings." He took both her hands in his. "The perfect moments have been the quiet ones, you playing cello in the studio at sunset, reading poetry to your father even when he doesn't remember who you are, challenging me in meetings when everyone else is afraid to speak up." Eleanor's eyes shimmered with emotion as James continued. "I once told you that beautiful things that frighten me have always fascinated me. What I didn't understand then was that the most beautiful thing about you isn't your appearance, it's your courage, your compassion, your unwavering integrity." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, a simple but elegant diamond set in platinum. "You've taught me to see beyond the surface, Eleanor. To value substance over appearance, character over convenience." He dropped to one knee. "I love you, all of you. Will you marry me?" Eleanor's smile was radiant as tears spilled onto her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, the ensemble began playing Bach's Cello Suite No. 1, the piece that had brought them together, music that spoke of beginnings and possibilities. In that moment, they both understood that true beauty is found not in perfect features or designer clothes, but in being truly seen and valued for who you are. Their journey had begun with a superficial transformation but had become something far more profound, a transformation of heart and mind that had changed them both forever. And as they danced under the stars, holding each other close, they knew that the greatest gift they had given each other was not admiration or attraction, but the simple, profound miracle of being truly seen. The narrator's voice returned as the scene faded. "Sometimes the most beautiful transformations aren't the ones we can see with our eyes, but the ones that happen in our hearts when we learn to look deeper." James didn't fall in love with Eleanor because she suddenly looked different one night, he fell in love with her because he finally saw who she had been all along. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Because in a world that often judges by appearances, the ability to see with our hearts may be the most important skill of all.